here today with composer Victoria Bond to talk about her piece for 2Flutes called Woven. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Laura. Pleasure to be here and to be speaking with you about this piece.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here with you. Thank you. I wonder whether you could tell us a little bit how does the title relate to the work's texture?
Mm-hmm. The piece was originally written for 2 violins, and it's inspired by the weavings of Jack Lenore Larson, who's a very wonderful, famous international weaver. And I was doing a program on Cutting Edge Concerts about the connection between weavers and composers, because a lot of the elements that weavers use, color, texture, even counterpoint with different lines going, are very much the way a composer thinks. And so I thought this would be very interesting to explore in music, texture, something related to weaving. So even though this is now the flute version rather than the violin version, it's still the same elements. And one of the movements is called tight weave, which has notes that are very close together, so giving orally the same kind of emotional impression that the texture in feeling, tactile feeling would have for a piece of woven fabric. And then the open weave, which is spaced further apart, again something that would be an oral equivalent to a not only visual but also tactile, which I found so fascinating about weaving as opposed to painting, because painting, unless it's a painting that has a lot of very thick texture, is mostly a two-dimensional visual experience. But woven is also a tactile, and that's something that we don't often translate from one sense to the other, from the tactile sense to the oral sense. So I thought this was a very fascinating to investigate. And you're an extremely important person in the evolution of this piece because, as I say, it was originally written for 2 violins. And you said, can you arrange it for 2 flutes? And of course, it's a different, completely different sensibility in the flute than it is in the violin. I mean, you're working with a column of air rather than a string. And the whole nature of a flute, the range, of course, some very physical, technical things, but also the quality of sound of a flute is so very different than a string. So I really had to kind of move my thinking around to think, how is this going to work for 2 flutes? And you proved that it works beautifully, so I thank you, because
it's amazing.
You are responsible for this particular version.
Oh, thank you. You are known for, as a composer, for your melodic gift and dramatic flair. And of course, you've written several operas, including Mrs. President and Clara. And I was wondering, this being a chamber work, whether you can talk about the dramatic elements in your chamber music, and specifically with regards to this piece. Maybe you can talk us through the 5 different movements of this piece and how this would play out.
Certainly. Well, the melodic and dramatic writing in my music stems from the fact that I grew up with opera. My father sang at the New York City Opera, and I was in the children's chorus from the age of about 7 on. And so I've loved opera from the very, very beginning. My mother was a pianist, and she would accompany my father, and he would, in addition to singing at City Opera, they gave a lot of concerts and played on the radio a great deal. So all of the music was dramatic and melodic. I mean, they did a great deal of Mozart, they did Mussorgsky, a lot of Bach. And so this is the music I grew up with and the music I love. And when I started to sing, the kind of music I liked to sing was music that was melodic. And as far as dramatic, I think all music is drama. Whether it's an actual storyline that is clear to the audience, or if it's abstract so that the audience either makes up their own story or doesn't make up a story at all. It's really interesting how many abstract symphonic works, for example, of Mahler, really have a storyline that the composer did not necessarily want the audience to know, because then it limits their interpretation to exactly what he was thinking. And I think music is abstract enough that you can infuse it with your own biography, as it were, or storyline. And in the same way, chamber music, I feel, has this quality about it. And in this particular piece, there are emotional stories within it. And I think some of these feelings are universal, like knotted. When you say, oh, my stomach is in a knot, it's never something that's relaxed and tranquil.
When you say knotted, you're referring to the title of the movement?
Yes, knotted, like being tied in knots, which is a quality of weaving, because there are very often close knotted places. But it also implies so many other things. As I said, in terms of musical texture, it implies that things are very close together. And when things are close together, they're usually dissonant. And dissonance conjures up a sense of anxiety. So everything works in concert together to create a dramatic mood. Whereas something like spinning has a regular kind of a tempo. There's a kind of contemplative feeling to spinning, going round and round, and completely different than the mood of knotted. And open weave also has something that's much more relaxed. Openness, just the word itself, implies that you're very spacious and relaxed. When we think of an open countryside, very peaceful. So all of these things have dramatic implications. And so I think that it's very much in tune with the idea of being a dramatic work.
Can you also say something? So one of the movements is the last movement of this work is called Tapestry, and Tapestry is the name of the CD. That's where we got the idea. It's, of course, we called it New York Tapestries, because all the composers are New York composers, and tapestries, so there's a lot of meaning, but of course we got the idea from that movement. So again, maybe the way you talked about the other four movements with regards to this movement, what when you think of a tapestry and then apply it to musical elements?
Well, a tapestry to me implies several things going on at once. When we think of the medieval tapestries, usually there are figures of people, maybe horses, maybe animals, birds, flowers. So it's a visual counterpoint. And that was what I meant in tapestry. It's kind of a summing up of all of the other movements and a layering. And of course, with 2Flutes, there's a lot of counterpoint that is possible with two instruments, because of course you have different registers, you have different dynamics, you have different tempos. So the contrast between those within each instrument gives you a whole variety of voices to play with. So the idea of a tapestry is this contrapuntal panorama of different things happening simultaneously.
Sounds amazing. Another question, I'm interested to learn a little bit more about from your perspective. So, as a composer, when you are writing a new piece, do you like to have a particular instrument in mind, or maybe a particular performer that you would think,
I generally write pieces for specific people or occasions. It's almost never just sort of pulling it out of the air.
Yeah.
So I find working with a performer a very inspiring collaboration. And even though this piece, when you and I were working on it, was originally written, it changed a lot, you know,
Yeah.
from the violins to the flutes. And so I really loved collaborating with you, hearing you and Pam rehearsing it, and just, you know, feeling your energies as performers, your sensibilities. What is so exciting, I think, about being a musician is that each artist contributes his or her own specific artistry and point of view and perspective. Because even though we speak the same language,
Yeah.
We come at it from many different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, life experiences, and we bring all of this into the mix of this one object, as it were, or this one event. And I find that so inspiring. So yes, I like to write for specific people. And then when something is done by another person, they bring a new energy and a new perspective and new ideas into it. So I find that my ideas kind of escalate with the people that I'm working with, who may bring things to a piece that I never thought of before, which may be much better.
Thank you very much. This was very inspiring. Thank you.